Thank you. As the Zoom has just said, folks, this meeting is in fact being recorded. That has started now. I want to read in the chat. We have a message in here from our chat moderator today, Casey, that says, "Thanks for coming." The song is "It's a Good Day to Fight the System" by Shungudzo. Probably pronounced that wrong. If you need assistance with accessibility and or Zoom technology during this event, please message Eva, the Tech DJ, for help. Their Zoom name is Eva Tech DJ. Eva will happily troubleshoot with you. Continuing on this vein of access, we are going to review some accessibility norms that we have here for DDP. I'm getting some background, so I'm just going to go ahead and mute some folks. It's nothing personal. So I'm going to share my screen in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I share my screen, folks, the ASL interpreter might move for you, depending if you have gallery view, side-by-side view, etc. So I will give folks a moment once I screen share to find the ASL interpreter. Okay, this is Rami. I have begun to screen share. I'm going to give folks a second to see if there's any problems in the chat, but it looks like we are good. So I'm going to continue with a couple reminders about access. We have automated captions going. In order for those to be as accurate as possible, please try your best to speak slowly and enunciate. This also greatly helps the ASL interpreter. If you don't know how to turn on your captions, they are located to the right of where the share screen button usually is. It's a button that says CC. If you are on mobile, I'm not sure how to turn them on, but Eva might be able to help you. I would like to ask folks to please stay on mute while we are presenting. It is very helpful. Okay, that's interesting. We have somebody in the slides in here with me. Let me go ahead and just, well, I hope it's not too much of a distraction for folks. These yellow lines that appeared, I do apologize about that for those of you that are on the slide. So yes, as I was saying, it helps to stay on mute so we can get the good quality sound. We are also gonna ask folks today to please use the chat minimally as it isn't super accessible. So if there is something in the chat and it is crucial, I will do my best to read it out loud for everyone, but do try to use it minimally, please. What else? So it also helps for some accessibility purposes if you turn off your camera, if you are not a panelist or an interpreter. It helps folks looking for the interpreter or the panelists find those faces quicker. If you are an ASL user, you will be reminded of this again, but if you have a chance to do it now, we would appreciate if you put a #1 in front of your name. For example, #1 Dessa Cosma. This will help us put you in a breakout room with an ASL interpreter. If you don't want to participate in breakout rooms today, that's totally fine. Please put an N before your Zoom name, and we'll put you in what we call the quiet room, where folks will have cameras and mics off. And you can go off and do your own thing. You can use it as a sort of break. We understand that it is the evening. As I said before, Eva, DDP's summer intern, who we're so grateful for, is our tech DJ/tech support. Please private message Eva in the chat or come off mute and interrupt us. Don't worry, it won't feel like an interruption if it's for access. And let us know that you're having problems, and we will fix it. One value that we have here at DDP is that we stop for access needs. So if I interrupt the panelist while speaking because, say, the ASL interpreter froze, we will stop. We will not continue without all of us being able to participate. And there also will be a break in the middle of our 2-hour session today that is programmed in case folks want to break and want to do the breakout room. On the next slide, I want to quickly review the agenda for today as just a quick bird's eye view so folks have a sense of what we're doing here. We're right now in the welcome portion and access check. After I'm finished with this portion, Chantel from Healing by Choice will be leading a grounding exercise and land acknowledgement. I will then share some of the context that has us here today, as well as our goals. We'll segue into an introduction of our panelists before taking a small break, and then finishing the meat of the event, or tofu, with 2 panel discussions, a small group, and a Q&A. So hope that sounds good. Hope that sounds good to folks. I also want to quickly remind you all of some community agreements that we came up with at the previous event. As you know, this is a series. This is the second in the series of 5 conversations that DDP is hosting about ableism, racism, and ageism, and how they intersect. These agreements are simple. One is that we value access, our access agreements, which include stating our name before we talk, speaking slowly, etc. We listen carefully and deeply to what our panelists and each other have to say. We share with I statements from personal experience. We practice allowing room for contradictions and embracing the both and thinking. We expect and accept discomfort and any unfinished business. And we expect joy. We want these to provide you with some form of joy today. And we're confident that that'll happen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and give folks a second to pin the ASL interpreter or change their view to what works for them. Okay, moving on. I would like to, we'd be remiss if we didn't express the deep gratitude we have to the University of Michigan Medicine Ideal RRTC Community Grants Project for funding all 5 of these sessions. They make it possible to compensate all the folks that are working so hard to put this event on together. In the chat, Casey has dropped a link. If you cannot access the chat, you can feel free to come off mute, and we will make sure that you get the link if you are interested in learning more about the Ideal RRTC Community Grants Project. Whew, this is Rami. Access check is a mouthful. With that, folks, we conclude our welcome, and I'm gonna now pass it over to Chantel by Healing by Choice. Healing by Choice is a circle of women and gender nonconforming people of color who are health and healing practitioners based in Detroit. There is a link in the chat to their website, healingbychoicedetroit.com. Without further ado, I will go on mute and have Chantel begin. This is Rami. Chantel, I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you, and the mute icon isn't on.
How is that? Is that okay?
This is Rami. That is great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Aloha mai kakou. It's an honor to be with all of you this evening. I would like to lead us in a grounding practice. But before I start, I would like to ask everyone if they could either come to a comfortable position, whatever that feels right and good for you. It is lowering your eyes, feeling your back against either your chair, if you're laying or sitting, feeling what's holding you. Taking in a deep breath through your nostrils and exiting all the things that took for you to be here today. As you take in a deep breath, you can use it as an anchor to bring yourself more fully to this moment. And as you exhale, you can use that breath to let go of things that might be distracting you, or things that you didn't get done or need to get done when you're done here. So using your breath as an ally, bringing you into this moment.
Got a problem, America. Junk sleep is what you get from a bed.
I would like to first honor. Thanks, I'm back on.
This is
Rami,
Rami.
can you hear? Hi, can you hear?
This is Rami. Chantal, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, someone muted me, that's why. Can you hear me now?
This is Rami. Yes.
Okay, hi, this is Chantal. I wanted to, think for the technology is interesting. Going back to our breath, leaning deeply into this moment. I wanted to honor the city of Detroit, its people, those that came before the Anishinaabe, Potawatomi, the Great Lakes as its first medicine, Detroit being one of the largest Black cities in America, and it uplifted its people. By joining them are also the growing Latinx community, as well as Dearborn, that is populated by those from the Middle East. We uplift all of its people, its practices, its genealogy, and its maternal lines. I would like it for us together to take some cleansing breaths before we enter this practice and conversation for this evening. It's called a 4-square breath. It's really beautiful to help the nervous system in calming And it's a practice of 4s, and we're going to do it 3 times. So taking in a deep breath for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And holding. 2, 3, 4. And just let your breath be easy. We'll try that one more time. Deep breath in. 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3. Let your breath be natural. One last time. Taking in a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Holding. 2, 3, 4. Let your breath be easy. Let's take in a quick body scan. Starting at the top. Slowly making your way to your forehead. Between your eyebrows. Going down toward your cheeks. And your mouth. Down to your chin. Your neck. Your shoulders and your chest. Feeling the quality that's in your belly. And in your mind's eye, scan your body all the way down and just check in and see what is the quality of energy that's vibrating in these spaces. You can use your breath to move into these places and soften them on an inhale and an exhale. Remembering that these practices are always available for you. You can always do a scan and check in with your body at any time. And that 4 square breath that we just learned, that too is always available. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. May your conversations be enriched and filled with beauty. Thank you.
This is Rami. Thank you so much for that, Chantel. That was very useful to me for sure. I'm sure to many other people. It's always a pleasure working with you and really anyone at Healing by Choice. So I'm gonna ask folks to just come back to a more intentional place. Camille, would you mind muting? Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I would like to transition now to talking a bit about the context of what has us here today, as well as the goals. Again, my name is Rami, and I'm the community organizer for Detroit Disability Power, the link for which has just been dropped in the chat. And our mission is to build the political and organizing power of the disability community here. We believe that true inclusion is revolutionary, meaning that when we design this world and our culture to accommodate the diversity of people that live here, we can change and have changed everything. I'm here today as a last minute change because our original moderator, Dessa, is sick. So please bear with me. Dessa sends her best regards and is super bummed she can't be here this evening. So for those of you that saw the flyer, you noticed that Dessa was supposed to be the moderator. So I'm tapping in today a bit last minute, so be kind to me. Moving on to like more context for this event, over the last nearly year and a half, as we've lived and organized through a global pandemic, the systems of oppression we knew targeted our communities became even more evident as people of color and elders and people with disabilities were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And not just the virus itself, but all of the social infrastructure that collapsed or changed. We have had to fight for even the most basic access to COVID testing, accessible medical care, and vaccines specifically prioritized for our community. So that's the context. That's where the idea for this series, focusing on the intersection of racism, ageism, and ableism came from. I want to take time for a quick plug. This 5-part series about these 3 intersections continues over the next 3 months. We're going to be discussing different aspects of ageism, racism, and ableism at each of the 5. We'll have different panelists, but a very similar format. And we hope you will join us for all of them and invite your friends. To RSVP for the future community conversations, the link has been dropped in the chat. If that's an access barrier for us, please let us know and we'll get that RSVP link to you, though it is the same RSVP link that you used to register for this event. We hope that over the course of this evening, you learn some new things, you deepen your intersectional analysis especially, and you reflect on your own life and work and leave really inspired and motivated to create a world where we can be our full selves. I'm really honored to be here with you all and our panelists this evening. Before we dig into the meat of our questions, or before we dig into like the panel portion, we have a poll, a Zoom poll. If you've never done a Zoom poll before, it'll pop up on your screen right now or soon, and it asks a question. The question being, growing up, I was taught that disability was a negative thing or something to avoid, and you choose whether you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And if the poll itself is inaccessible to you, you can come off mute to let us know if you would like. And this is going to be particularly useful to us at DDP and perhaps even our panelists to get a sense of who is in the room. And we will share the poll results as soon as Eva closes the poll. So as a reminder, the statement is, growing up, I was taught that disability was a negative thing or something to avoid. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay, gonna give folks maybe a minute or two if they haven't answered. Never mind, I think the poll is closed. Thank you, Eva. I think anyone that was gonna answer it answered. Now, Eva, question, are you gonna share the results? Can other folks see the results?
This is Eva. Sorry, Rami, we are having tech issues launching it, so it actually hasn't launched yet, I think. Give me 1 second.
This is Casey. I am able to see them and it says I did share them and it's giving me the option to stop sharing, but I can read them
perfect.
and type them in the chat here in a second. We are at 75% participation rate. 11 folks said they strongly agree, so that's about 27%. 13 folks said agree, 32%. 11 folks said disagree at 27%, and 6 said strongly disagree at 15%. So a pretty wide range, and I'll drop those in the chat here in a sec.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Casey. I appreciate that. I would like folks to keep these results in mind, and I'm actually going to stop sharing them in a second, but they will be in the chat. I would like you to keep these results in mind as you reflect on your own experiences as a young person and as you witness our panelists present. So sort of just like keep this in your back pocket. It gives you a sort of lay of the land and the sense of who's in the room. Okay, really excited for this part. I'm now going to introduce you to the panelists we have this evening. I am going to introduce them one by one, read a quick bio for them, and also I'm going to be asking them a question that they will answer briefly. We'll let each panelist finish answering the question before moving on to the next panelist. So up first, we have Kador Farhat, who is a public speaker, advocate, and activist for individuals with disabilities, quality education, and equity. Kador has a political science degree from the University of Michigan and is currently running for city council in Dearborn. So if his name sounds familiar, it's probably because of that. Kador, can you please reintroduce your name, your pronouns, your age, a visual description of yourself if you'd like, and a quick story to the question, when did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school? What did this mean for you and your family?
Thank you, Rami. Thanks to the Trade Disability Power for the University of Michigan for their grant project. And I would like to thank all the panelists and everybody who's in attendance for such an important event. My name is Kador Farhat, and I was born blind in Beirut, Lebanon. I am 28 years old. I am a degree holder in political science from the University of Michigan, so go blue. And yes, I'm running for Dearborn City Council this year. This is a very important question, and I think I realized, and my family did the same. They realized that I was treated differently in the community and the society overseas growing up in Lebanon. When I grew up a little bit and I started, not being able to participate in a lot of games or things that like activities, with the kids. So my family realized right away that I am blind when I was young. They noticed that I couldn't, let's say, run after the ball or find my toy or even run to things when I was a little baby. But now when I grew up, in the neighborhood, let's say I couldn't, ride my bike. I couldn't do things that they used to do, like play soccer or even, tennis and, walk freely and independently, in the streets, crossing streets and what have you, or even distinguishing what kind of candy bar is this, what kind of bag of chip is that. And that really taught me a lot because it taught me how to deal with things differently. So on one hand, it is heartbreaking, or it was heartbreaking, it was difficult, it was challenging to deal with. But in the meantime, that taught me how to deal with life from a different perspective. And my pronouns, sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm a him, his, he, obviously. Visual description, 5'10", 225 pounds. Brownish skin, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern. Thank you.
This is Rami. Thank you so much. So happy to have you here. We're going to move on a bit quickly for the sake of time here. Over to Kathy McAdam, who is a retired medical social worker with 20 years experience at the Rehabilitation Institute of Michigan. She also worked with Michigan Disability Rights Coalition, leading assistive technology, or AT, projects to improve access to assistive technology devices and services. Currently, she is the president of her local Lions Club, working on a district-wide assistive technology recycling program. Kathy, same question to you. When did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school? And what did this mean for your family?
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I use the pronouns she and her. I am a white woman with very gray hair. I am blind, and I'm 74 years old. So some of my history goes back to time when understanding disability wasn't as firm as I think it is today. And so one of the first things that happened for me, I had 2% vision in one eye. That's 4 200ths in one eye. That's not hardly much at all. And what I did for the first, up till probably my late teens, was try to pretend I could see. Got me into a lot of trouble. But my family helped with that because denial was really important to them for me to be okay. Now, I say that, but at the same time, I went to a school to learn Braille and all the skills of blindness. So I was in a classroom with all kids that were disabled. Mostly in that room, it was kids who were blind, and I was bused to school. So I also met a lot of other kids with other disabilities. So I think it was a challenging time. But one of the things I remember very vividly was walking down the street with my sister, Margaret, who could see, and she was describing to me a house with a checkered tablecloth and kids sitting around playing a game. I don't remember what it was. And I was just in awe because all I saw was a shadow of something in front of me, not a window. So for her to tell me she was seeing all those things, I think that was one of my first memories of understanding just how different my visual experiences were. I am now totally blind and have been since my 20s, and I'll talk more about that later.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Kathy. Learned a lot about you in that. Thank you. I guess that's why we're all here. Next up, I would like to introduce Paul Johnson III, who works to address intergenerational poverty through his role as lead team case manager with the City of Detroit's Community Health Corps. He has worked in human services for more than 15 years, including 11 years at Disability Network Wayne County, Detroit, a partner of DDP, where he helped create a Medicaid-eligible nursing home transition program to help seniors and those with disabilities live more independently. Paul, same question. When did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school? And what did this mean for you and your family?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. My pronouns will be myself and ourselves. I'm going reflective today. I knew I was different when I had to go into speech therapy because I slurred my words and I had to pronounce vampire, and I had to go to, my dad had to take me to therapy for 2 years. And it was frustrating because my friends didn't go to speech therapy, but I had to. So my dad had a dedication to make sure I had the skills to be successful. However, it never was like a pity party. He wanted me to be treated just like everybody else, but also have the resources, which my family had the opportunity to give me. Not every child has that. So I feel really lucky and privileged. And then just how else, I mean, when I was in kindergarten, I had a kindergarten teacher that said I wouldn't make it to out of grade school and even to high school. So, you know, it was just, you always have people that are going to throw obstacles and tell you you can't do it, but you just show them that, hey, you can. And that's how my life has been, always proving everybody wrong, but doing it for myself. And that's why I'm here.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that. You are welcome to share your age and image description like other
Oh,
folks.
yes. Oh, this will be fun. Let's see, I'm 40. I'm a beautiful Black man with chocolate skin and beautiful brown or black eyes. There you go.
Thank you so much, Paul. This
You're
is Rami.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. Love that. Okay, we're moving right along here to our next panelist, Owulabi Aboyade, who is a multidimensional cultural worker from Detroit. He is the current coordinator for Community Care Circles, a program by DDP, and he's also the co-founder of Relentless Bodies, a Detroit-based creative disability and healing justice collective. In order to spotlight you, Owulabi, oh, never mind, your spotlight. Great, thank you. So continuing with your intro, he has been negotiating kidney failure since 1990 and has survived lymphoma, heart failure, and other physical ailments. Owulabi, starting with your pronouns, image description, and age, could you then also answer the question, when did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school, and what did this mean for you and your family?
Peace and greetings, everyone. This is Owulabi. Let me know if there's anything in the background. So if I should pause, if it's too loud. I am a 42-year-old African man with a green shirt and a face mask, sitting in a clinic-type chair. My pronouns are he and his. In response to this question, I think in recent years or even decades, social media has taught us that there's no normal or abnormal. There's people you vibe with and those you don't. But our generation, we were taught that we were freaks and we were alone. Social media and other online communication helps to create communities where young people of various ages can see that they're not alone and learn how not to center other people's experiences. Also, something that's happened recently in which nerd and geek culture is uplifted in mainstream pop culture, media, mass communications, and social media, which is very different from the 1980s. My best friend in elementary and middle school, James, had a back brace and heavy orthopedic shoes, but we never talked about health, just role-playing, games, and school. At 12 years old, I was vomiting daily, a few times a day. Went to the hospital and was told that my kidneys were only functioning at 5%. Peritoneal dialysis involved placing a tube in my stomach and nightly home dialysis treatments to filter my waste, which were primarily done by me and my mother, which is an experience that I really didn't share with any of the other adolescents, that I knew. Thank you.
This is Rami Owulabi. I'm grateful for you sharing. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to introduce our final panelist for the evening, Hala Al-Zawi, who is a graduate of U of M Dearborn with degrees in sociology and gender studies, and is a member of the Healthy Dearborn Coalition's Inclusive Health Committee, which promotes healthy practices, physical activity, and accessibility for individuals with disabilities and their families. She is the Michigan Disability Rights Coalition Gender and Religion Initiatives Coordinator and is currently pursuing her Master's of Social Work. Hala, can you please tell us your pronouns, an image description, age, and then answer the question, when did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school? And what did this mean for you and your family? This is Rami. One last thing about Hala, because she's on mute. If Hala turns off her video, it's only to preserve her internet bandwidth. It's a tech issue we were troubleshooting prior, so we apologize in advance. We understand that for some folks it is more accessible for speakers to have their camera on, but it is because of the internet. So Hala, please.
Oh, so for now my camera is working. Please let me know if I cut out at any time. Okay, so my name is Hala Alazawi, as Rami mentioned. I use she, her pronouns. I am wearing a blouse, a black blouse with white polka dots, sorry. And I'm wearing a really dark lipstick and glasses. And I have my hair braided. And I'm 26 years old. Is that everything? Do I need to include anything else, Rami?
This is Rami. You cut out a little bit for me, but it was just for me. I noticed that my internet was the one that went out. So as long as you gave us your pronouns, visual description, age, and then answered the question.
Okay, so the question. Okay, so for me, I realized that I had a disability when I was pretty much entering grade school. So kindergarten, around that point when I was about 5 years old. My parents, they never made me feel like I could, that I couldn't do something. They always told me to go, push myself, pursue my education. They always made me feel like I was no different than anyone else. But the thing is, they were overprotective of me. They understood my limitation. I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old. And there were just certain things that I couldn't do. Fast forward to when I was about 5 years old, 6 years old, my cousins told me that I couldn't play tag with them because I was too slow. And because I'm a walker user, I didn't want to hold them back. So, throughout like my elementary school kind of years, my formative years, my middle school years, I kind of tried to hide my disability, even though I knew it was physically impossible. I mean, I use a walker, so it's hyper visible, right? But I didn't want to identify with my disability. And I think like my parents, like they knew that I had to be protected. And since I am the only child, they are like overprotective of me at home. But again, they never doubted my ability to do something. They told me, if you set your mind to something, you're doing it. And so I come from a predominantly Arab American community in Dearborn. It's very tightly knit. So, they understood that people kind of, they made like well-meaning, but kind of ableist comments and things like that. But they kind of sheltered me from that. And for a while though, when I entered elementary school, I knew, I was really, really like, I ran away from my disability for a bit and I didn't really embrace my disability until adulthood, but more on that later. And thank you all for being here. Thank you all for listening to our stories.
This is Rami. Hala, thank you so much. I love that you and Kathy gave us sort of more on that later. Nice cliffhanger you're leaving folks on.
Thank you.
I like to also eat my words. My chat box is over one last panelist's name, my co-worker. How could I forget? So now I would like to introduce our final panelist, Teddy Dorset III, who is a deaf filmmaker and businessman who earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan in Screen Arts and Culture. He also graduated from the Motion Picture Institute, where he concentrated on directing and editing. Teddy is the CEO and co-founder of Teddy Boy Entertainment, LLC, as well as the communications manager for Detroit Disability Power. How lucky are we? I would like to now give Teddy a moment to introduce themselves with their pronoun, their age, visual description, and to answer the question, when did you realize that you were different in some ways from other kids in your neighborhood or school? What did this mean for you and your family?
Thank you so much, Rami. I really appreciate that introduction. Again, my name is Teddy. This is my sign name like this. It's same as the sign for the animal, the bear. My pronouns are he, him. I'm wearing a black zip-up hooded sweatshirt. I have some large glasses on my face. And then I have dreads that are done up and set on top of my head. I also have a button-up t-shirt that is gray and red. So I am a filmmaker. I grew up as a fifth or sixth generation deaf individual. My brothers and sisters are also deaf. My father was the lone hearing person in our family. My mother was deaf. We did have certain privileges granted to us because of that. For example, I'm able to speak. However, I largely rely on using American Sign Language for communication. But if I do need to speak and sign, I'm able to. Although I do notice that my speech is not really on par with the way that I sign. My father often would preach to me that speaking is the way to do it. You have to speak because you don't want the world to ignore you just because of your deafness. And so that caused a lot of inner turmoil for me. I want to communicate in a way that's accessible. I want to socialize with those who communicate in the way that I need. So the result of that is who I am today.
This is Rami. Thank you so much. I would now like to segue us into a break. So in the break, mull over the responses and first impressions that you have of our panelists. Maybe you already have some questions for me. I'm going to ask Eva to please stop recording. We won't record the break. This is Rami again. Thank you so much, Eva. Okay, folks, hope you had a restful break. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first group of panelists. We will be learning and just getting a ton of great info from our panelists in groups of 3, just to make sure that everyone has ample time to answer each of the questions. Our first group of panelists will be Hala, Teddy, and Kador. As they speak, they will, or as they communicate, they will reintroduce their name each time. So for folks still learning names, that's no problem. We're going to start with Hala with the first question here. I'd like to remind folks that if at any point there is an access barrier, please feel free to come off mute and interrupt us or to chat Eva. The question for you, Hala, in your experience, what was different about growing up with a disability or chronic illness, and what was the same compared to non-disabled kids? And you were sort of getting to that in your introduction.
So this is Hala, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Like Rami mentioned earlier, thank you so for confirming, Rami. So I think what was the same is that, again, like my parents had the same expectation for me as an able-bodied person. They wanted me to get the best education possible. And they wanted me to like fully participate in anything that like my fellow peers were participating in. Like they didn't, like, even though they were overprotective of me, not to the point where like they like excluded me from participating in gym or anything like that. Like they were very I guess open-minded when it came to that. But I guess like a couple things that were different. I had more doctor's appointments, obviously, for my physical limitation or disability, I want to say. I just, it just felt like my disability at a certain point was more heavily medicalized than it is now, if that makes sense. And it's just like, I had like what's called a baclofen pump put in on like my hip area, and like some of the medication that was coming through to me from that pump made me really exhausted at school, so that kind of set me apart from everybody else. Eventually I had it removed, but that's pretty much like for the physical limitation. Also, I use a walker, so sometimes my friends would see me in a wheelchair, other times they'd see me in a walker. I was primarily in a wheelchair just for transportation purposes. The bus people determined that I couldn't get up to bus fast enough in case of emergency, and I couldn't get off fast enough. So they put me in a wheelchair for the duration of the bus ride. And then I transferred into my walker when I got to school. So definitely like a heavy medicalization of my disability was definitely present. But everything else, like in terms of education, in terms of everything that my parents wanted me to have, you know, in comparison to an able-bodied person, that didn't change. So.
This is Rami. Hala, thank you so much for those reflections. I'm gonna swing it over to Teddy with the same question, because during his introduction, we heard a bit about parallel experience with his family in terms of finding that balance between overprotective, but also perhaps some assimilation, a push to assimilate with non-disabled kids. Teddy, what would you like to expand more about on this question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rami, for that truncation of of the introduction. Again, this is Teddy speaking. For me, growing up, my father, like I said, was hearing, and he made sure that we were not experiencing any sort of oppression. It was really more about fear mongering, I suppose, in a way, the type of language that he would use with us, the type of things that he would do, how he would punish us, or just his perspectives in general. They were intending to encourage us, but really they came off as very confusing. Which leads me to say I'm very thankful for my mother, who is deaf and uses sign language, who helped me to really find a good equilibrium there in that experience, to try and balance having kind of that safe sort of space where I'm able to take care of myself and use the sign language that I depend on, but also make space for speaking, which was a bit of a challenge for me. A lot of my friends were not able to speak like I was, for example. And so the perspective that they held was very different from my own. A lot of my friends were dealing with a lot of their own forms of oppression that was quite heavily layered. And so that was definitely a challenge for me to navigate since I was a kid, and even now as an adult. I'm 35 years old right now, and I'm still working on accepting my identity as a deaf individual. 2 years ago, that was really a hallmark for me when I decided to just accept who I was. It was tough.
This is Rami. I especially love that last part of your answer, Teddy, because it is edging us into question 2, which are about your reflections as an adult. But before we get to that, I do want to hear from Kador about his answer to this question about what was different about growing up with a disability or chronic illness and what was the same compared to non-disabled kids. Our 2 other panelists have grounded this in family and have really used their relationships with family to answer this question. Kador, you can do the same, or you can take us in a new direction. But in your experience, what was different and what was the same about growing up with a disability?
Sure. This is me, Kador. Again, thank you so much. This is a very important question. So I was born legally blind. And why I'm saying that is I have been accompanied with this disability for my whole life, and I'm 28 years old today. So 28 years, living with this disability has been a struggle. My 2 sisters are visually impaired as well, but we are the only 3 in the entire family on my mom's side, on my dad's side. So just by having that matter as something new to the entire family from both sides was disastrous and was challenging and was really like very frustrating. So to start off from there, the setting was Beirut, Lebanon. As a third world country, we didn't have a lot of resources. We didn't have much technology. Even a lot of westernized countries, even the West itself, we're talking back in 93 when I was born, and then 95, 96, 97 when I first went to school. Even a lot of these advanced countries did not have much to offer when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to technology, when it comes to accessibility, internet, computers, what have you. So I went to a private school, but not only private, but private for the blind, deaf, disabled, in every shape, form, and way that you can think of. So the difference that we were not integrated, I was not integrated into the society at large. However, when I went home after school, that's where I made my friends. And I did not have one blind friend. I did not have one disabled friend. It's not because I wanted to run away from that nature or environment, but because I wanted to live my life just normal. I wanted to see the difference between my culture in school and then the culture outside in my neighborhood and outside the school community. The same, a lot of similarities. I'm a human being. I deserve to live. I deserve to receive quality education. I deserve to be respected and treated with dignity and honor. And for that, I'm very thankful for God first and foremost, for my family, and for the private school that taught me pretty much all the subjects, that everybody learned. But again, I'm thankful for life, for being the biggest school for me out there, because if it wasn't for the struggles that I overcame, and if it wasn't for the lessons that I had learned, and I'm still learning every single day, I mean, education, academic is not enough on its own. So the differences will stay with me. At the end, I am blind, and being blind, you have to convert everything to a different format. I can't see body language. Even when I immigrated to the States 12 years ago, I didn't speak a word of English. And being blind also, that means that I can't follow your body language if I'm trying to communicate with you, or if you're trying to point me towards a certain direction. So it was tough. It is tough. It stayed tough, but I will stay tougher. And life is no easy, but we get tougher and we get stronger. Thank you.
This is Rami. Thank you, Kador. That's a really rich response, and honestly, we could unpack that for a while. If you don't mind, I kind of want to start with you, Kador, while we have you with the second question, just because there's a few things you said that I think help trail nicely into this. The second question as it stands is, as adults and or parents now, how do you use the insights of growing up with a disability or chronic illness to help others or to dismantle ableism? And I wonder if you could speak specifically about your passion around education. It's come up a couple times now. But if that doesn't feel like the most relevant place to go with this question, I fully empower you to take it where you want. But you were getting on the role of sort of using your experiences to form your new adult attitudes. Could you say more on those?
This is me, Kador. Absolutely. So education was certainly the pathway that helped me to pass all of that stage and all of that journey back then. Because if it wasn't for the education that I had received and that I'm about to receive soon in my graduate school, I can't do what I'm doing today as a professional. But in the meantime, what I was trying to say is the experiences in the streets and in the neighborhood also cannot be underestimated either, because that's a different kind of school, especially when I tried as a blind child to improve on my skills and to prove in the meantime that I can do whatever you guys can do. I can try and I can do it, and I can overcome all these struggles and obstacles. So the insights are very simple. I'm not going to draw a heavenly kind of image over here. It is tough. And you guys can close your eyes for a second, and you guys can imagine if you want to eat, walk, talk, study, work, travel, whatever the case is, you want to study, travel, whether via train, airplane, driving, transportation, walking on the sidewalk, biking, going to the gym. Everything is really a struggle. Everything really is a huge task to take on.
This is Rami. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got the video was interrupted because I got a phone call. I apologize. I was using my phone because I'm campaigning all day, so I apologize. But But the insights, and I will wrap up. I'm sort of taking a lot of your time. So the insight as an adult, I'm not a parent yet, about to, hopefully getting married in about a year. But as an adult, I tell people to never give up. Always look at the positive side of things and always learn and thrive. So it's very challenging, very tough. But again, there's always that light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Rami. Thank you so much, Kador. Folks, I hope that we are also thinking about some of the potential reflections and questions that we will be bringing into the breakout rooms that are coming up after this group panel. Continuing on, I'd like to swing things over to Teddy, who also was, like I said earlier, edging us towards this question in his response. The question being, now as an adult and a parent, because you are both, Teddy, how do you use the insights of growing up with a disability or chronic illness to help others and or dismantle ableism?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rami. For me, talking about how difficult it was for me and my experiences growing up, now as a parent, I really just don't want that same experience for my children. I wish my father, who himself had very strong Christian values, his perspectives didn't come across very supportive, especially in support of my deaf identity and to get to know and experience my deaf culture. Just a bit of a negative reflection, honestly, on that perspective. While at the same time, I tried to remain positive, learning ASL, communicating with those in my family who are deaf. I just wish that he would have accepted the deaf community. And I feel like that would have helped my overall self-esteem and self-worth. But him not being so much in support of my signing and effectively forcing me to speak, it did so much. But not only as my deaf identity, but I'm also a Black man as well. And so to have that identity partnered with my deaf identity, I wanted to recognize who I was. And my father was always like, you are a Black man. You are not a deaf man. You are a Black man. And he really put the fear of God in me about growing up Black. So there were a lot of things that I had to work through. And now as a father of 3, I'm still learning that my children will see things differently and will experience things differently than I did. And I've learned how to advocate for myself and to fight for the things that are important to me and to go against those anti-oppressive and to push forward anti-oppressive things in the community at large. My children can be whatever they want to be, and I don't want to discriminate against them based on my own prejudices and biases. I want to focus on them, on their mental health, and I want them to know that it's so important to just love everyone and see the world as a complete space and to just be involved in that and not focus on any barriers, because that's not what's important. If my children want to do whatever it is they want to do, I want to be there encouraging them, not telling them they can't do it. I want them to know that they can do it. And that's the thing. Anytime anybody tells me I can't, well, I can and I will. It's possible for me and I can do it. And again, those Christian values, though they've had those negative connotations, there's also been that positivity that leads me to say that I can do all things. Thank you.
This is Rami. The nuance you bring in, not only with race, Teddy, but with your gender as well, is really interesting. And I think we could have a whole panel dedicated to that. So I hope that gives folks some food for thought there. Hala, I kind of want to take the question in a similar direction. So the same question being like, how do you use your insights now as an adult? But if you have an analysis that can also bring in the fact that you are a racialized person, you're a person of color, and not only just a person of color, but a woman of color. And I wonder if this was something that was salient for you, as salient as your disability when you were younger or not. And what other insights you might have on that?
Well, definitely. I feel like my identities, those intersections definitely played a huge role in shaping like who I was and shaping like my identity as a whole, my overall identity. Um, so not my parents immediately, but there were some relatives like who would, constantly, say, "Oh, she's a girl, she needs more protection and more just more like care, more round the clock care." Whereas I know if I was like a man, even if I had a disability, because of the cultural stereotypes around gender, like I think like a lot of people in my community, not all, there has been an awareness, I think, since the 90s and the early 2000s when I was growing up. But I still get like some of those comments that, I was framed as being more vulnerable, and I think that's because I'm a woman of color, particularly in my community. I think if I was a man with a disability, like, I'd still like people would still look at me as a human being who needs care, but I still believe, I still maintain, I don't know if this is like true. Kuder, you can speak on this if you want, but I still maintain that like men with disabilities are considered more, I guess, independent, just because they're, men, whereas I'm someone who needs extra care, not only because, the perception is that I'm someone who needs extra care and extra, I'm extra vulnerable because I'm a woman and because I'm of color and because I'm someone with a disability.
This is Rami. Kador, I see you came off mute if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, I just want to try with this Mikador. First off, I appreciate all that you do, and so for Teddy and all the panelists and everybody who's in attendance, because all of us play a role in making this world a better place. I would like just to make a comment that, I mean, women in general, in all cultures, in different societies, even with a disability or without it, they are still facing a lot of discrimination and huge inequality, even like at the workplace. Like you will see two managers, a male manager gets usually paid higher than a female manager for the most part. I'm happy to hear that things are getting better, that we're getting rid of a lot of these inequalities, yet we are far from done. And yes, so I just want to point that out, but you're really great job, you guys, for overcoming a lot of these obstacles. And we have to keep the fight in order to make this world more accessible for everybody. Nobody deserves to be discriminated against, regardless of the circumstance, the color, the language, the background, the religion, the ethnicity, the disability, sexual orientation, etc.
This is Rami. That's a wonderful addition.
Yes, I definitely.
This is Rami. Go ahead, Hala. You came in and out a bit, but you're stable again.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I wholeheartedly agree. I think that even though, like I mentioned, that things have gotten a little bit better, we still definitely have a long way to go. I mean, definitely, like I feel like now that I'm older, I don't know if this is applicable to this conversation, but now that I'm older, like my relatives are saying, "Oh, you should get her married," especially since like my mother was my primary caregiver and we lost her to illness a few years ago. But my father, I mean, he's always supported me. He's always done an extraordinary job as a parent. And I just feel like people just think that my dad can't take care of me as well as a woman could. And like that causes them to be more concerned about my well-being, and that causes them to, like, I think, perpetuate the idea that I need a male presence, like, or like, I mean, I already have a male presence with my dad, but like they think that I just need round the clock care, and that like if I had like a companion or a partner, or, well, more specifically in the context of marriage, if I had a husband, then my problems would just go away like that. And I think that's a huge misconception. I think that I can be someone who's independent, who's whole, who is fulfilled, with or without a partner. And I think if I choose to find a partner, that's only for my personal individual fulfillment. I don't believe that I have to live up to anyone's standards. And I don't believe that I have to explain myself to anyone or explain my choices to anyone.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Hala, for illuminating the way, especially in which even relationships are something that ableism creeps into for the lives of people with disabilities. I really appreciate that this group added a fourth intersection. We are not talking about racism, ableism, ageism, and sexism, which is awesome. The more nuance we add, the more honest our analysis is. That brings us to the end of our first panel with our first group of panelists here. I'm just going to give. Yes.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a comment.
Please go ahead.
If that's all right. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add to the discussion a little bit, talking about my background. The reason that I became a filmmaker, the reason behind that as a deaf individual is how important inclusion is and recognition is. So like for a panel discussion, like for Owolabi to be here, to be involved in social media and print and TV, for individuals to have that representation, how we're able to, the way that we have access to education, I really feel like my role as a filmmaker is there to bring that awareness and benefit to those who just simply don't know about disability or don't have that concept of what that looks like and what that could mean. I just want to increase that awareness. And, you know, we do that by doing it. So I'm able to do that. I'm able to provide that representation, which is, you know, ever so essential. Again, as a Black male, we don't see enough Black representation in a lot of, in terms of a lot of different media. We want to see more Black representation in media, and so choosing this profession and trying to bring that sense of equality, not only to representation for Black individuals, but also for accessibility.
This is Rami. What a wonderfully necessary addition to that, Teddy. I appreciate your comments. I will move us along a little bit quickly now to the breakout rooms because we are just a tiny bit behind schedule. Nothing that will throw us off too much. So right now, Eva's going to start working on the breakout rooms for us to chat a bit about what we just heard from the three panelists. If you require an ASL interpreter in your breakout room, please put a number 1 in front of your Zoom name. You can change your Zoom name by hovering over your Zoom tile, right-clicking, and then choosing rename. If you do not want to participate in a breakout room and would like to go to the quiet room, please put an N, a capital N in front of your name. That'll let us know to put you in a room where everyone will have their mics and video off and we'll sort of be taking a process check or a breather. The breakout rooms are pairs with the exception of if there's an ASL interpreter present. Just a quick note from Michelle, please put an N by your name, not in the chat, please. By your name, your Zoom name. So in our breakout rooms, we will have about 9 minutes to answer 2 reflection questions, and in your pair, you'll have time, hopefully, for each to go back and forth. The questions will be dropped in the chat and will be available in your breakout room, but they are, what do you remember being said or silenced about disability when you were growing up? What feelings and emotions are associated with those memories? How do you think those early messages about disability impact how you act as an adult? So go ahead and check the chat if that's accessible to you to recap those questions. You have a moment while our tech DJ sorts us into breakout rooms to start thinking of your answers or to change your Zoom name. This is Rami. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the main room. I see that some folks are still trickling in. Okay, this is Rami. I'm going to go ahead and get started with round 2 of our panelists. This is Rami. As you come back, please mute your phone or laptop. Welcome back, everyone. Rami speaking. Please go ahead and mute yourself. And we're going to go ahead and transition into the second panel. I really hope that your one-on-ones were rewarding. Full transparency, there is a small abbreviation. So we were going to make time for some of your one-on-one sharing reflections to be shared here. But now we're going to ask you to hold some of those reflections and maybe shape them into questions for the Q&A. So we can go ahead and get started with our second panel and prioritize that. Our next panel will include Kathy, Owolabi, and Paul. We're going to start our questions today with Kathy, and the questions will be very similar to the first group, but they're open-ended, so our panelists will share new insights, I'm sure. So Kathy, would you like to start us off by answering, in your experience, what was different about growing up with a disability or chronic illness, and what was the same compared to non-disabled kids?
First of all, I'm not sure you restarted your recording, so I just want to make a note of that. I'm going to talk a little bit more in terms of adolescents and young adults, because I think that that's pretty relevant to the discussion we're having. So one of the, well, a couple of things that were different in the up until the 6th grade, I was in a classroom with all kids with disabilities. And after that, in high school, we had classroom breakouts for different classes. So I was still identified very much as a person who was different than the other school kids. The interesting thing is that I'm the only person in my family who went to college. And the reason for that was directly related to my disability. I didn't get my first job until I was 26. I think back in the 50s and 60s, and even into the 70s, finding that first job was very complicated. And so the recommendation was that many kids, without really a direction, go to college, even if we didn't know what we wanted to do with it, which happens to a lot of other kids too. So that was a big difference, and it actually gave me a lot of opportunities. It was my first chance to move away from home and live in a dorm. It was my first opportunity to find out how much I had actually depended on my family, and to understand my loss of vision. So in 1972, I totally lost the tiny little shadow vision that I had. And that was actually a big difference for me in terms of a lot of mobility. And that's when I got my first guide dog. And one of the things that happened with that for me was I felt more comfortable because I had this cute little pet with me. And I always called her the first one I called my boy magnet. But anyway, it was a way to get introduced to people without the stigma of the staring that I was starting to notice with the white cane. For me, again, I think this is very different for everybody, but that stigma seemed to be there. And I think I'll stop there, and let's hear from the other panelists. We can always come back if there's time.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Kathy. The word stigma is also a word I like to deploy a lot in disability spaces because it truly is that layer of reality for a lot of us with disabilities. I want to move over to Owolabi, who I'm sure might even have some comments related to stigma and the navigating of that as a young person or adolescent. Owolabi, same question, differences in growing up with a chronic illnesses.
Yes, thank you very much. In terms of differences, I think Paul in his introduction talked about family resources. And I think one of the family resources that I have to highlight is I was introduced to meditation and holistic awareness probably at about age 14 or 15, which is very rare compared to a lot of peers. As a result, people may say that I'm woo-woo. They may say that I'm a conspiracy theorist. But as a result of medical trauma, as well as coming to understand the medical industrial complex, but also especially my parents' commitment as Black social workers from the South, by the time I was in high school, I was already considering my place in the generational war against my people of African descent. And part of what I understand, even hesitate to center a comparison to non-disabled kids, is because of how this culture uses toxicity and illness as a form of genocide. So many kids in Detroit have asthma. So many kids in Detroit have mental illness. So many kids are processing trauma and physical, mental, chronic illness. One of my coworkers describes how her nephew developed asthma just from being in Detroit in one weekend and had to be hospitalized. And as soon as they left the emergency room, it was like, nope, we can't have this kid be in Detroit anymore. We got to bring, take the kid to the suburbs, where it's all right. So they did not develop asthma in a lifelong way because they were able to leave Detroit and go back home. And I think I relate to life and death in a way that most of my middle class adolescent peers did not. Being told at age 12, that I could have been dead or should have been dead. I also think I relate to spiritual life and daily practice because I had to have a daily medical practice every evening. I had to get on this machine, to save my own life. So I had to caretake my own health starting at age 12 in a way that many don't start considering until maybe they're in their 20s or 30s, when their body starts slowing down. And then lastly, I heard echo in Teddy's comments and a little in Paul about like the legacy of slavery and the way in which we have to work through pain, the way in which we have to present like everything's all right, in order to make a living, in order to, take care of your family, in order to, keep it moving. We've been taught generationally to have mastery over our bodies. We've been taught to suck it up. We've been taught that, we're gonna die, it's gonna kill us if we don't put on a certain kind of face and don't let them know that we're hurting. And that's a very generational legacy that I too felt as a, my dad, and I'll conclude with this, my dad taught me pride, how when I was in high school, he would bring my work to the hospital as I was, just waking up from a kidney transplant or just waking up from operation, I'd be in the hospital doing homework and shit. And so I think that, this legacy of being able to move through this pain and not having a language for self-care, is part of the experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Owolabi. That was a really rich response. There are so many tangents that you introduced that I really appreciate, but what stood out for me was sort of like the reality that some of us are born into families that offer us the tools to understand who we are in a more radical way, if that is the right word to use. I'm also impressed that at the age of 14, you were already introduced to holistic healing, which is kind of like your star role with DDP as a community care circle facilitator. But you're right, it is unlikely that at 14, folks start learning about holistic healing. Paul, I'm curious about what was it like for 14-year-old Paul? How did you navigate growing up, and what were the differences that your disability manifested for you when compared to the non-disabled kids around you?
You know what? At 14, I was just like any other teenage boy, wondering, hey, is this girl gonna like me? But I had asthma, really bad asthma, that wouldn't allow me to play football. And I wanted to play football because I thought maybe I could play for the Detroit Lions and help them win a Super Bowl. So yes, I mean, those are things, but as a adolescence, just my parents, my dad was a teacher and then matriculated to work for Michigan Rehab Services. And my mom was a teacher. So they encouraged education. And they didn't want me to, they wanted me to always fight. And then Lobby and Kathy just talking about their experiences. I had a chip on my shoulder. I just from people telling me, again, I couldn't make it out of kindergarten. I wouldn't make it out of grade school, and just everybody kind of putting labels on you. You just want to overcome that, and that's what I did. I overcame it. Even in college, I had obstacles, and I always just wanted to be the best Paul Johnson I could be. And then working in the Human Service Disability Network and where I'm at now, I'm able to give people access to service and have empathy for people that could have been in my shoes. And that's what's missing in policy. People don't have empathy for other shoes, other people's pain. Because everybody has pain. And remember, the person that smiles the most, they could be in the most pain. They just don't want you to see it. And so I overcome pain. Right now I do with sleep apnea and having a machine every night to help you go to sleep. That can be a scary thing, but still you overcome it. And I guess for me as an adolescent, just having the supports, I really didn't know until I got into college that I had like an intellectual disability. When I started working with kids with intellectual disabilities, that I would get information that would come to me at a fast pace. And it didn't slow down until I got to college. So just that understanding. And I'm going to take that until I become an old man. And hopefully if I can have one or two children, allow them to have that empathy, but also allow them to be them. Yes, you will be a person with a disability, maybe if you're born with it or not, but be you. Don't be afraid to be who you want to be. Don't let society put you in a circle or a box. Break the wheel, break the box, and just be you. So that's what adolescence did for me.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Paul. It's a really wonderful answer, and I appreciated your emphasis on the empathy that you've cultivated.
Yep.
There's no way of knowing whether you would have been born an empathetic person or whether our disabilities make us more empathetic. But as a disabled person myself, I think that a lot of my empathy stems from my experience as a disabled person. On that same vein, I want to loop back to Kathy and ask you, I'm sure empathy is on your list somewhere, but what are other sort of insights that you now really apply as an adult that you cultivated because of your life as a disabled young person?
Well, as a disabled young person in the 70s, I got my first job in 72. And I worked in a mental health clinic for 7 years. So when I went to get my second job at a rehab facility, I didn't think it was going to be as complicated as finding the first job. And it actually ended up being worse because they would not give me an application even to apply for the job. So I had to go back in with some people and talk to the head of the organization. And the word got out that I did that. So people thought I got the job because I did that instead of my own talent or skills. But what that did is it brought me full circle into fully embracing disability and understanding a lot of the issues a lot of my peers and other people were going through, and that new people acquiring disabilities would be going through, because that was now going to be my work because I did get that job. So this was prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I think in my work later, helping people understand the American Disabilities Act as a civil rights act. I am a white woman. I had privileges other people with disabilities did not have. I didn't always understand that, by the way. I do now. But I think the issue of discrimination in it's not fully understood. And the Americans Disability Act still is not fully understood as a civil rights action. And so a lot of my work goes into that.
This is Rami, and great and necessary work that is. I love reminding folks that ADA is the floor, not the ceiling. It's where we start, but there's so much more to go.
Yeah.
Folks, because we have 10 minutes left, I would like to ask participants to begin now formulating questions that you might have for the Q&A, which will be about maybe 5 or so minutes. We're going to treat the next 2 responses from the panelists we have up here as a sort of part of the Q&A. So Paul and Owolabi will have a chance to answer the second question, and then we'll move immediately to any questions audience members might have for any panelist. And like I said, you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure to go one by one, or you can come off mute when I cue that. I apologize for the sort of merging of activities there, but I do want to get us all out of here on time. Swinging over back to Owolabi, Kathy shared briefly about, I think called it like a full embrace of disability. And what I know about you, Owolabi, is your experience resonates with me because it aligns closer to what traditionally would be associated as chronic illness more than disability. So I wonder how, what is your story with coming into the word disability, and like when did you embrace that, and if that is something you embrace, and how did your childhood lead you up to that?
I have a mixed relationship with the word disability, but I use it in spaces like this. I think that my story, to be brief, is a lifelong journey with relationship to vulnerability, especially as a man, as a Black man. And I think that like asking for help, or even I used to keep it a secret, these different types of things. And so it took a while, it took 30 plus years for me to realize how to communicate about my experiences, which limited my ability to have friends. And now in terms of my work, I help others via the Care Circle. I help others to leave activism and burnout culture. I'm a confidant to many people who have invisible illnesses and feel, a lot of pressure and stress, and feel like in order to keep their jobs, they have to keep these things invisible. And then lastly, I appreciate what Teddy was talking about in terms of media. I'm a hip hop artist, and I made a couple songs such as Day to Day Struggle and This Aching Muscle, which really kind of challenged this idea of hip hop as this tough and vulnerable, like what being a man is and all that type of thing, that it exerts a great pressure. I think it's changed now, but coming up in the 80s, it was a very great pressure on how to be and how to present ourselves. Shout out to Shamako Noble, who was the first hip hop artist I saw that took a picture of himself in the hospital as an album cover. And shout out to Leroy Moore of Crip Hop, who's an OG in Black men disability creativity.
This is Rami. Thank you so much for that, Owolabi. I'd like to move the mic right along to Paul to also share with us, for you, what insights did growing up with a disability afford you? I know you mentioned empathy, but is there anything beyond that? I'm sure there is.
That you're constantly having to prove yourself to people. And really at the end of the day, you got to just do the best you can. Screw what everybody else thinks. That's really what it comes down to. And then how it moved me forward is everybody's going to hate you, or if they don't like you. And also, a lot of you said as far as the nerd culture, reading comic books like the X-Men, or just different things that it's okay to be different. It's okay to be you. And that allowed me again. So you had a question as far as when did I understand about disabilities? Well, when I actually got my first job working for Disability Network, It was not planned, but that's where God had me go. And it was the most amazing experience as far as being around people that really just needed that guide, that beacon of hope. And I felt like a superhero. So I love superheroes. I felt like I was an everyday community avenger. And it's been amazing. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, be able to avenge and help people. And I mean, all the hurt, I turned the hurt into love. And that's what the world needs, love and empathy, and also people that are willing to break down the walls and change policies for the betterment of everybody. That's what I fight for too. And I also call it the double whammy. I've been discriminated against for people discriminate against me if they have a disability, if I'm African American because I'm articulate. People, some in the African American culture say maybe you're kind of whitish because you speak well. Well, you know what? There is no cookie cutter approach to being who you want to be. So
Yeah.
I just try to be authentic and I try to lead.
This is Rami. Thank you, Paul. Your energy is coming across even on Zoom. You're a really like motivating speaker, by the way. I love the way you've been answering our questions. We have 5 minutes remaining, and we have a couple of questions in the chat for Kathy, for Teddy, and one for any panelists. Before that, though, folks, I would love to take us up into 8 o'clock with Q&A. So I'll get some logistics out the way now so we can focus on the panelists because they're really the treasure here. And those logistics are just that you'll be receiving a follow-up email after this event with not only the recording, but with a call to action. We were going to squeeze in a couple of minutes to talk about it, but I'd rather hear our panelists. The call to action is a petition relevant to something that is ongoing right now for people with disabilities. So after this event, if you're hungry to take this energy somewhere and translate into some action, that email that you receive from us in the next 48 hours will help you like put some action behind your energy here today. But using these 4 minutes to continue our questions, and we might not get to all of them. One for Kathy. This one is from Tyler Urias. It says, I was just curious, being in the unique position to have lived before the ADA and after its signing, I am wondering if you had any experience, positive or negative, that was overcome both pre and post signage of the ADA. Sorry if this was a long question, and no problem. I don't think it was a long question.
No, not at all. Well, when I went to apply for the job in 1979 and did not get an application, for many people, that would have been the end of it. They would have said, oh, I can't go on from there. It was enough to make me ask for another interview with the head of the department. Because by that time I knew I had experience for 7 years. I wasn't going to let somebody tell me I couldn't do the job. The first job I got, they said to me, well, we don't think you can do this job, but our social worker thinks you can. So I still got hired under a cloud, and I just wasn't ready for that again. The ADA made it clear that you could not deny an application to anybody applying, and what questions can and can't be asked in an interview. And so then I spent the rest of part of my career after rehab was working career development, teaching how to do interviews for a job, and even how to talk about accommodation needs in a proactive way so that it didn't come out as a negative. So the ADA has really been huge. I paid for my own reader for years. With the passage of the ADA, the Rehabilitation Institute started paying for my reading services. So there are just definitely, there are huge advantages, especially for employment.
This is Rami. Thank you, Kathy. I just kind of like dropped my jaw at the thought of you having to pay for your own reader because luckily we live at a time where that's slightly absurd. Although I think there are still places that would probably make someone pay for their own reader.
Yes.
Teddy, we don't have a ton of time, but we have a really good question for you, if you're up for it. The question is, in terms of access in education, what were some of the biggest obstacles you faced and would like to see change to better the experiences of deaf students in the future? This is Rami. I know that working with Teddy earlier, he was having some internet issues, so we are going to assume that might be what is going on. We have one more question in the chat, and maybe if we could get just one response from one panelist that hasn't shared. The question is from Brandon, and it says, any advice for a 17-year-old which has a chronic illness and uses mobility aid in entering the adult world? I'm trying to be as independent as possible and have no disabled adults to model after or support me in my life. So maybe a quick word of advice for this youth that's on the call today before we close.
Don't be afraid of being you. Your aid is to help you. And if people don't like the aid, they're not somebody you need to be around anyway. Also, continue to come to organizations like DDP, Disability Network, all the other support groups. There's strength in numbers. You're not alone. And just form your own path.
Hey, Rami.
Yes, Kadar.
Yeah, sorry, me, Kadar. Sorry, I can't be on video because I switched locations. My only kind advice is first and foremost, I'm more than happy to listen, more than happy to assist in every way, shape, and form. And also, I'd like to echo that we have so many great organizations like the DDP, Detroit Disability Power, and amongst other organizations that be willing to chime in. So please don't be shy, speak up, stand up for your rights, and be your own advocate. And again, I'm more than happy to assist in every way, shape, and form if I can. So please don't be a stranger. And this is the same for everybody too. And thank you.
This is Rami. Thank you so much, Kodar, for offering yourself up like that. I will check in with each panelist, but maybe if you all allow it, we'll include your email in the follow-up, and that way folks can be in touch. I'm seeing that many folks are in agreement with. Brandon, thank you for your question. That'll be our final question, but I do want to point out that Owulabi also answered the question in the chat by saying that Brandon, as well as anyone else, can join our community care circles. The link for that is in the chat and will be in the follow-up email as well. Great place to start getting to meet folks. With that said, folks, we are 1 minute over time. My sincerest apologies. There were probably many questions that we didn't get to, but you know what? That's good because that means you'll follow up with these people and hopefully start building your relationship with them. If you like coming to events like these, but like them so much that you would like to plan your own, that is something that is available to our members. And you can become a member of DDP by following the link in the chat. Thank you to the affirming comments in the chat, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your night, early evening if you're joining us from another coast. Big thank you to our panelists. Honestly, I would want to stay and talk to them for another hour, but they are very busy people being heroes in their own corners of the world. So with that, folks, we're going to go ahead and close this meeting. DDP staff, please stay behind for a debrief. Panelists, you are free to go. If you would like to drop your contact info in the chat before you go, that's up to you. Otherwise, we'll email it to folks. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rami. Thank you, DDP. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us this opportunity in this space to express ourselves. And to be an informative resource for people for this panel. Thank you.
And Hala, it's so good to see you. You have grown so much in your schooling. And last time I saw you was for the last event I organized a lot of times. So great job.
Yes. Likewise, Paul. I always enjoy seeing your advocacy on Facebook and seeing you have a good time. And I really hope that we can come together in an in-person event very soon as well. I really enjoyed our panel, our time together, and I hope that we can replicate that through other events soon.
We will.
Thank you, everybody.
It's time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rami. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always.
Thank you.